And welcome back. The revised CRP 5 is now posted. Considering that it will take some time for parties to read and digest, we will proceed with adoption of the L document first. If so, I would like let us now look at L2 on the theme on the knowledge component of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. We have earlier approved the CRP. Now I submit L2 knowledge management for adoption. Can we adopt this document? I see no objection. L2 is adopted.
Sorry, there's some confusion.
Yeah. Okay, the name, right?
Okay, it's okay.
L2 is this one, the role.
Thank you for your cooperation. The name of L2 is the role of in-depth dialogue and the role of language in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovation, and practice. And now we proceed L3 document. The name is Joint Program of Work on the links between biological and cultural diversity, review and update of the 4 adopted traditional knowledge indicators. So we have earlier approved the CRP. Now I submit L3 for adoption. Can we adopt this document? We have the floor from Colombia, followed by Russia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Speaking about document L3, and in light of the discussions that we held in plenary yesterday when we were working on the CRP, we would like to see in para 3 on sub-paragraph E, letter E, in its 5th line, we'd like to see the mention of environmental defenders, women and girls and environmental defenders. Thank you.
Russian, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Before I come to a couple small editorial questions, can you please repeat the suggestion from Colombia and where it goes?
Colombia, sorry, can you repeat?
Thank you, Chair. With pleasure, I will repeat my proposal. My proposal comes from the discussions we held yesterday and bearing in mind the language that we had in the CRP document, which was examined yesterday. And the proposal is to again include under paragraph 3, subletter E, on the 5th line, right after the mention of women and girls, include and environmental defenders, and then continue from indigenous peoples and local communities. This would be in line with what we discussed yesterday.
What we heard from the countries, from the parties. Thank you.
Okay, we proceed with a request from a distinguished representative from Colombia. So we only open the floor for their intervention. Any objection? If there is no objection, please switch off the microphone at first. Only we leave to objections. So we proceed with Togo.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that the Secretariat has done excellent work in recapping what we have. And with regard to the concern or the proposal from Colombia, I think that yesterday maybe with regard to the sentiment of all countries and specifically environmental rights defenders, what we suggested was that with regard to youth and women, we found it completely relevant to keep it in, but for rights defenders and others, we believed that it was not necessary. So there you have our position. So we don't agree with the inclusion of that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. If only on this point, we are of the same view as Togo. So we had extensive discussion on this topic yesterday. And even if language to be a correct one, which environmental human rights defenders and not environmental defenders, we still don't see the relevance here in this particular part. And I think we spent a lot of time yesterday on that. So we hope that we can stay as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Swatini.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I also want to join the previous two speakers in saying we wouldn't agree to the insertion of what Colombia has inserted, very specifically because our understanding of what is currently reflected in this document in subparagraph E is what we could at least find common ground as parties. But everything else outside that is what we couldn't find a common ground. And we wouldn't want to spoil the good work that has gone into us finding that common position that we currently have. And we strongly believe that reintroducing this particular aspect, which we strongly believe doesn't really tie well with what this particular subcategory. to do is actually watering down all the good work and all the effort that we've done in coming up with the compromise text. And we want to further remind ourselves that what we have currently there is not anyone's position, but it's what we agreed during the discussions, that it's something each one of us can live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Chile.
Of Colombia, and in trying to find consensus, we would like to suggest to adequate it to the language agreed under the Target 22 of the CAM in Montreal GVF, which said, open quote, environmental human rights defenders, stop. Thank you so much.
Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to what the previous speaker said, and bearing in mind Target 22, as well as the whole proceedings of this meeting, which tended to accommodate the positions of all the countries, I would like to maintain or support the proposal by Colombia, and that would basically mean leaving it in brackets, which would indicate that we haven't reached an agreement, although we haven't lost hold of the idea or the concept that Colombia put on the table. Thank you.
Canada, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'd like to plead with you as chair to have a little bit of discipline here. This is an L document situation. And so what our opinion may or may not be as a delegation on this issue is irrelevant. The only thing that's relevant is what this body agreed upon at the CRP level. And so if the Secretary could please help us to remind us what was agreed upon, at this moment we shouldn't be introducing new text or anything like that at all. It's only to make sure that the document reflects what was talked about and agreed upon at the CRP level. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. You raised a good point for the discipline of this procedure, because we are proceeding the L document, so there is no possibility to have further comments. With this, I just would like open the floor. Can we adopt this L2 document as it is? Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Chair. I would like to remind you that yesterday we had a lengthy discussion on the subject and that multiple proposals were put on the table. And at the end of the session, it wasn't altogether clear what the final text actually was. It is for this reason that I am requesting that we leave the text as it initially stood in the CRP, although it's not the text as mentioned in T22, as mentioned by the delegate for Russia. It is the text that was in the CRP document, and that is why I mentioned the words environmental defenders. If there is no agreement on the subject, I would like this text to be put in brackets. Thank you.
Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, we did have a long discussion on this yesterday, and there wasn't agreement, but we believe that the text you have in front of you is what we... There were different views among parties, but we believe that the text that you have in front of you is the one that reflects what we agreed to transmit to plenary as an L document, as Canada said. And as Canada said, at this stage, we should just be verifying that that is true, that the Secretariat hasn't made a mistake, essentially, on this. We shouldn't be entertaining discussion unless there are things that we have absolute consensus on. We cannot include anything in brackets at this stage because it would make no sense, because this isn't a recommendation to the COP. It's what this working group is asking to be done as of today. So it makes no sense. So we have to agree. If we have more than one view, then we have only really two choices. One is to keep the text as it is. The other is not to have a recommendation. We understand that there were different views expressed yesterday, but now we're at the stage of adopting the text that we approved yesterday. It should be a formality unless we have had we've made an error in conveying what we agreed yesterday back to the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Can we adopt this L3 document as it is? Colombia.
Thank you again, Chair. The Secretariat is right in the sense that the paragraph that I'm referring to is the paragraph as worked on by the working group and not the recommendation to the Conference of the Parties. So in that case, I would just like to state for the record the fact that this issue has been addressed, and for the statement to include the fact that the mention of gaps by the indicators group also mentioned the human rights defenders as spelled out in T22 when mentioning adequate indicators for the targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. With your comments, we can adopt this document. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, we have several editorial things. So same paragraph E we just discussed on the second line. We made this proposal at the discussion of CRP, and we believe that that's supposed to be addressed. 4 traditional indicators. So we suggested at the CRP stage to delete this number because it doesn't make sense anymore in the new setup. So second point, we like to seek advice from the Secretariat, as for us it's a new form of referring to decisions, adding date. So I don't remember that we did it before, so we prefer not to have dates And I like to draw attention of the Secretariat that across the documents of this meeting, not only in this document. And the last suggestion we also made at CRP stage, the very last paragraph starting encourages. We believe that it will be nice to put number 1 there to make a distinction of operative paragraph from preamble paragraph. And also will look better that at least we have one operational paragraph in this paper. Thank you.
Secretariat, please.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe the correction that the distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation made in paragraph 4E to delete the word for, F-O-U-R, is correct indeed. That should be deleted. Regarding the other points, let me assure you that this document will be finalized in accordance with the guidelines of the United Nations, the editorial guidelines, which do indeed specify that we should include the dates. And you'll see this has now been introduced and will be introduced systematically in line with the editorial manual of the United Nations. Regarding whether or not the lone operative paragraph, it is an operative paragraph that's indicated by the tense of the verb. It is an operative paragraph. We will confirm whether or not that should be numbered in line with the editorial guidelines of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was just for a question of application, because when Colombia finished its statement, you said that we would adopt the document, but you didn't say if we were adopting it with the inclusion of what was tabled by Colombia, or we're adopting the document as presented without that.
Secretariat, you have the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to clarify the document was adopted as it was presented without any amendment, with a mention to reflect the comment in the report of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Can we adopt this document L3 as it is? If there is no objection, we adopt it. Now we proceed document L4, updated the draft acknowledgement management component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I would like to ask, can we adopt this document, L4? I see no objection, then this document is adopted. Now we proceed to our document 5, recommendation from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issue pertaining to the Convention on Biological Diversity. I would like to ask the floor if you agree to adopt this document. Togo, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I recall that With regard to this document, we made a number of suggestions with regard to the concerns that we've already voiced. We highlighted the fact that any document under the context of the convention should reflect the principles as enshrined since the beginning, that is to say, the fact of integrating the issues of indigenous people with local communities together. The question which is asked was to know what is the value added of this document with regard to the key issue at hand, creating something specific or a specific decision relating to indigenous peoples. So what we suggested was that the title or that the document be bracketed entirely, the whole thing bracketed, such that we could have a deliberation on what is the value added of having this. Some states parties explained that the document or this type of document reflected the same name of the body, but we think that even if a decision is taken at the UN level, it still should be, we should still take ownership of it, and that taking ownership of it process requires us to look at the principles of the convention up to date, and that means applying all of the implications. So, for example, adding local communities in the decision. So that's why we would suggest, without, again, reopening the debate, but we would just suggest bracketing the entire document and not just the paragraph 3 or from paragraph 3. We'd suggest the entire thing be bracketed. Thank you very much, Chair.
Please hold on. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And indeed, this is another CLP where we had a lot of discussion on this at the CLP stage. And of course, there was a lot of discussion on in particular with regard to the second preambular paragraph, but it's been left in the form that it was because we understood that that discussion on that paragraph was superseded by the request from, I believe, Eswatini to put the entire draft decision in brackets. And you'll see that indeed the entire draft decision to the Conference of the Parties is in brackets. There's a bracket before the reference to the Conference of Parties, and there's another closed bracket at the end. I mean, similarly to the point we were making with regard to L2, it really doesn't make sense to bracket the earlier parts. I note that the title is merely the agenda item that we were addressing. So I think given that obviously there are a number of parties here that do wish to have a decision at the COP on this issue, and there are, of course, some that do not, or at least would want to change the text here, that is already indicated by the fact that we have the draft decision itself in square brackets. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. I give the floor to DRC.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. And let me thank the Secretariat for the clarifications that have been provided. Chair, a hunter doesn't hunt in an unknown forest. Otherwise, he'll meet ghosts. So, in going through this document before lunch, we gave clarifications on the reasoning behind the why of actually, and also the value added with regard to the document in order to achieve the goal, which is promoting the final objectives of the convention. There was a discussion on that. And everything that we adopt as a decision here should be based either on the global framework for biodiversity or on the Convention on Biodiversity and its protocols. These documents give recommendations in an ongoing manner. And for us, working on biodiversity, we're being asked just to adopt that. Chair, I've never seen the CBD send recommendations to another institution which requests that institution to adopt something. We are not in a position to adopt this document. And you said yourself, Chair, that you encouraged all parties to follow the discussion on this issue. But there is no discussion on it. So that is to say, we cannot evolve or move forward with these documents because if not, we're going to find ourselves attacked from all sides. And we'll find ourselves split in twain, fighting against ourselves. So we would, again, ask that we focus on the analysis and the adoption of this document. Let's just put it in the folder and move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Swatini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm raising my flag in an issue of placement. I do understand that this entire recommendation is in bracket, but I just want clarity in terms of the placement of the first bracket. The last bracket is okay, but the placement of the first bracket, in our understanding and in my recollection, Africa made the point that we are not even in support of a recommendation at all, which is why we believe that the opening of the bracket should not start at the Conference of Parties, which means there is disagreement in terms of the content of the recommendation, but we have a disagreement even in terms of do we have a recommendation or not. So the placement of the opening of the bracket should not be where it is, but should be up where it says draft recommendation submitted by the Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Secretariat.
Thank you. So just to note, of course, that this convention has quite often provided requests or invitations to other bodies, and that also the Conference of the Parties has, for a number of times now, considered recommendations from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues on the basis of discussions in this working group. I wonder if one suggestion that might help reach a consensus here could be if, instead of saying recommends, that at its 16th meeting, the Conference of Parties adopt a decision, we say consider adopting a decision to indicate that it's not agreed that we should adopt a decision. So I just offer that as possibly as something that might help. But I see there are other requests for it to you, Mr. Chair.
DRC first.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. When there's bad weather, birds don't fly. And what you've seen is that weather seems always bad here, always stormy. Have you seen that the atmosphere in the room is not propitious, is not favorable to the adoption of the document? It would be wise, it would be judicious from your side to just pass on the adoption of this document. Then you would establish the proper judgment. And that's basically what is a question is at stake here. If you see that food is poisoned, but you still wish to eat it, you can imagine what the consequences will be. And it's at your own risk. We're only trying to warn you here. We're just trying to warn you of bad things to come. We're trying to have you heed our warning. But if you don't wish to change the attitude with regard to the stormy weather ahead, the storm clouds gathering, then you'll have to assume the consequences of that decision, which risk being irreversible, and it will be too late. Therefore, to avoid such a situation, we would reiterate our position, which is that we do not believe that we are currently in a position to adopt this document, to endorse the adoption of this document. And so when you will state that this document is not adopted, you will have made a just decision. I thank you very much, Chair.
Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And regarding L5, even though we understand the argument from the Secretariat that some of the proposals within the preambular part would have been superseded by the fact that the whole recommendation to the COP is in brackets, we would see an added value in reintroducing the proposal that Brazil and the European Union had suggested as an alternate to the two preambular paragraphs, for the first and the second preambular paragraphs, which would read as recalling paragraph 7A of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which from our perspective received a lot of support and could perhaps enable a way forward with this document. So we would suggest adding this alternate to the first and second preambular paragraphs. Of course, we understand this would be in brackets in any case, but just to include this for further consideration until COP16 and try to move us forward with this document. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Again, just trying to remind ourselves what we ended up with at the CRP level. And, I take and appreciate the suggestions from Brazil, but I'm not sure that's going to enable us to find a way forward. We were certainly sympathetic with that proposal back at the CRP level, but again, I don't think here we want to get into a discussion and rehash the discussions that we had at the CRP level. Our recollection was that the draft COP decision was all placed in brackets. I think you could probably have a discussion about whether or not that starts at the Conference of the Parties, or it starts at recommends that. I'd be really hesitant about editing those words. I think it's more about where you place the square brackets. But we would certainly not be in favor, as some have suggested, in bracketing the title of the document. The title of this document is the agenda item, and the agenda item was adopted at the beginning of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Togo, you have the floor. Thank you, Canada.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. We don't want to return to what has already been presented. The only thing is that in the explanations of the Secretariat, what I thought that I heard was that they wanted to have a proposal that would move in the direction of saying that we envisage, but here what I want to say is that we don't envisage anything, Chair. We do not envisage anything. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Then it's Mexico.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to say that we are concerned at hearing the various observations and also the proposal that we do not submit this document for approval. We understand these proposals as a step back from all of the progress we've been making on Indigenous issues. In our view, it is very important that we move forward because in our own country, we are going through a reassessment of our Indigenous heritage. And this document is a step in that direction as well. And also, as Canada has pointed out, the title of the document was approved previously, and therefore we do not consider that the title can be put in brackets due to the fact that it had been previously approved. So that's not up for discussion now. We would not be abiding by our own rules of procedure. And in that connection, I would like again to state how important the approval of this document is for us in order to provide recognition of the rights of Indigenous peoples. And if the document were not to be approved, our impression would be that we are stepping back from recognizing these rights, which has taken years to be recognized.
Thank you. I give the floor to Guatemala.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Just like Mexico said, I would like to remind you of the rules of procedure, as has been done for the previous item we discussed, where we finally decided not to adopt what had been proposed by the sister Republic of Colombia. And this was done abiding by the rules of procedures. The Executive Secretariat and the co-chairs are therefore requested to abide by the rules of procedure and remember that the Forum on Indigenous Peoples Issues as was pointed out, is the permanent body of the United Nations, and that addresses issues that pertain to indigenous peoples, and that was established in the year 2000. So that is 23 years back, where work has been done so that all the human rights mechanisms or anything pertaining to indigenous peoples, such as is the case of this convention, ensure that they observe the rights of indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support the statements by Brazil, Canada, and Mexico and Guatemala. I find it somewhat strange that we are now proposing to change the subject or the title of a subject that was addressed by the working group, but that also was recommended by COP15, and that furthermore refers to the name of a forum that exists in the United Nations, which is the forum that indigenous peoples belong to. So this is unacceptable. It is unacceptable to request a change in the title or to request that the title be put in brackets. And as had been done in the previous item, I too would like to make sure that we abide by the rules of procedure. In this connection, Chair, it is important to examine Brazil's proposal because that could represent a consensus for us to move forward with the viewing of this L document.
Thank you, Colombia. Now I give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to request the inclusion of Brazil's statement while the CRP document was being addressed. In my view, I think it is customary to include brackets in a document of that already contains brackets. And I would consider it valuable for our discussion during the conference of the parties that we include an option for a text that has received the consensus of the GRULAC region, rather than lose sight of the valuable discussion that took place without prejudging of the results as to the totality of the document. In this regard, Chair, I believe that we should put Brazil's proposal in brackets and also include the text as it stands at present in brackets so that both proposals are duly reflected. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Swatini.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I just want to draw attention and also to clarify what we submitted before. Specifically, Mr. Co-Chair, what we are asking for is not something that is against the rules of procedure, one. Two, what we are doing here is completely different with the discussion that we had in the previous CRP. Here, we are just clarifying and even correcting what we did before when this document was still a CRP document. And what we are saying, Mr. Co-Chair, is not to change the title of this particular document, especially because this is an agenda item that we have agreed to talk about. But what we are requesting is to put the first bracket where it has to be, highlighting the discussions that we had this morning. Specifically, we made it clear through the voice of DRC as Africa Group that what we are not sure of about right now and what we do not agree of is even having a recommendation itself, and which is in that wavelength, Mr. Chair, that we believe we need to correct the first bracket. And again, we want to reiterate that what we are doing here is within the rule of procedures, and it's completely different with what we discussed in the previous CRP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two comments. First, we believe that the title of the agenda might not really necessarily be the title of the document discussed and agreed under the agenda. For us, the document, the outcome document of the agenda is a package. It's going to be decided by the parties in this regard. And our second, so we don't agree to the interpretation or statement which provides that because we have agreed this term in the agenda and it's final, the document or the title of the document must be as it is in the agenda. That's the first thing. The second thing, there could be also a landing zone for this document. As we have agreed in COP15, we didn't have any preambular paragraph, and everybody was able to accept that, and perhaps this could be a way out to resolve and conclude our agenda today. Thank you, Madam Professor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to EU.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We understand the various contributions that the delegations have made on this subject and the differing point of view that have been expressed as well. But in any case, Chair, we consider that it is necessary for this draft recommendation be submitted to the Conference of the Parties, and therefore we believe we need to move forward with it. For that reason, we believe that the acting executive secretary has made a good proposal, which consists in leaving it open and in the hands of the Conference of the Parties to adopt this decision, whereby the word Conference of the Parties adopt would be replaced by the word considers. Also, in line of the fact that it is better to foster the dialogue between the parties on this item. In addition to that, Chair, we would like to express support for Brazil's statement in the sense that the bracketed text should include the compromise proposal, which the EU and its member states had contributed, and which consisted in making mention in the preamble of we were able to agree in the Global Biodiversity Framework, C7A. And in this connection, we'd also like to support Argentina's statement, whereby this draft text should be put in brackets within the overall general brackets of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. DRC.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am taking the floor again to clarify a number of things. Firstly, Mexico said that we had agreed on the title. This is not the case, sir. This is false. We did not agree on the titles. And perhaps you would recall that well. Colombia said that this is something and that figures in the agenda items of the meeting, and that the reason, that's the reason. But the agenda is entitled provisional agenda. So provisional means that that can evolve, it can be adopted or not. Guatemala chair has said that we are attempting to not respect rules of procedure, but that's not true, sir. Do you really want to be to fall in such a trap? It's a distraction. That, of course, without even mentioning what is the rule or the procedure which was actually violated there. So which one, huh? So we are able to read text and understand where we're going, where the text is leading us. So let me give you two facts, and let me use them as means of proof. First of all, we understand where the discussions that we're having today are going to lead us. Why? Because first of all, in the DRC, we have indigenous peoples and we have local communities. We have both in the DRC. And so the DRC understands both sides of the coin. And the DRC also is saying that the first paragraph of this paragraph refers to indigenous peoples and to local communities. And the others don't. But that's the trap. That's the trap, sir. And please, we're almost to shore. Let's keep the course. What is needed to save this situation, Chair, is to respect the Conference of the Parties. That is a supreme decision-making body. The Conference of the Parties should not analyze documents that make no sense. That would be an insult to the Conference of the Parties, to send to it a document which is nonsensical and which actually sows the seeds of destruction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind parties of Decision 1521, in which we tasked the Executive Secretary to look at issues relating to our convention that were being undertaken by another group, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The recommendations of that body have been considered, and we've taken them into consideration here in relation to the GBF. So effectively, we tasked ourselves to do this work. We've brought it back and had a look at it. And now we need to know what to do next. And I think the proposal put forward by the Executive Secretary, which doesn't preclude whether we will or will not have a decision or at COP, enables us to have a further conversation. And I think the proposal put forward by Brazil and supported by other parties as the basis of that discussion is an important one so that we can have a dialogue at COP. My understanding is that without that we are not able to have a further consideration of issues that we tasked ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that there are a number of questions that have been raised which would lead me to believe that I need to re-specify the position such as we voiced at it. We spoke about the title, of course, as contained in the agenda. If it were to be the same as contained in the agenda, that wouldn't necessarily mean in extenso that we have to keep a title, even if it was adopted in one way or another during a review. It can lead us to revisit it. It depends on whether or not the title is pertinent, whether it's because the document has been investigated as a whole. So a title should speak to its contents, right? So if we have a title which doesn't allow us to understand what the contents are, then it is our duty to be able to underscore the issue. If at some point we saw that the contents could be presented, could present eventual solutions, then we should specify that. So we're not necessarily saying that we have to modify the title. We're not doing that now. But what we're underscoring is the fact that would be something that is possible, it's tangible. With regard to Brazil's proposal, we don't have any objection, truth be told, to this proposal, because what Brazil is saying is it's just recalling a paragraph from the document which we all recognize, we all adopted it, right? But we want to specify that, in reality, even if we were to take it as is, that wouldn't reply to the concern that we raised, because that paragraph in question does not only speak about indigenous peoples. It doesn't only speak about indigenous peoples nor local communities. There are other elements which are present in it. So if you look closely, you will see, if you interpret it, and I'm talking about para C here, we said that we should cite the form as an example, not the legal basis, just an example. It's not the legal basis for defining a decision. And so when you look at the decision and you think the decision might cause problems, then it would make sense for us to understand how we're going to implement things. Because for us, according to us, Chair, a recommendation is not a legally binding obligation. So every convention makes recommendations to the other. And we also have requested the collaboration from other bodies. We in the CBD have requested collaboration from other sides. But when we do that, if there's a request which somehow undermines the objectives of our convention, then we need to address that. If there's something that could lead to some sort of seeds of destruction, I don't know why we need to enter into discussion on that. I don't know why we need to have a decision on that. There are countries that have said that we have made progress and that this document is a fundamental part of saying that we are respecting the rights of indigenous peoples. If that's true, that would mean that we're actually calling into question everything that's been done up to date. If we think it's this very document, which is the thing, which is the legal basis for respecting the principles and the rights of indigenous peoples, then I'm quite sorry, sir, but then, I mean, think we have many other decisions which are also essential, which are also of capital import. For example, subsidiary bodies. On the subsidiary body question, even though today we are wondering if it's still relevant or not, but we close our eyes to say, yes, it is important. So those are specific decisions which help us to take into account and address the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. But if you have a decision and you see that you read it, you wonder what its use is it really a fundamental document? Is it such an essential document for justifying the rights of indigenous peoples? I have my reservations on that. So we would request that this entire document be bracketed, simply the entire document be bracketed. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Togo, for your intervention. Now I would like to stop your intervention. As a presidency, China are actively making effort to find the consensus for the discussion, as much efforts as we can. We see there are different opinions, but we cannot give up at the very beginning, as many delegates said. We are listening to every party as much as we can to see if we can grab any opportunity for consensus that could be met. In this case, I suggest we break 5 minutes for consultation. Thank you. Dear colleagues, after consultations, I now would like to propose to make the revision as the following. Move the first bracket to the beginning of the paragraph, starting with the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group. Since we have to finish the work today and have another CRP to consider, therefore I ask for your cooperation and flexibility to adopt this L document, and then we can move on. Can we adopt this document with the revision as I proposed? Indonesia, followed by DRC.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Could you repeat again in a very more slowly manner so we could understand the new proposal? Thank you.
Okay. I suggest to move the first bracket to the beginning of the paragraph, starting with the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group. Can we adopt this document with the revision as proposed? DRC, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are coming back to you with some good news now. But before I share this good news with you, I'm going to give you a brief overview. And as regards the situation of indigenous peoples and local communities, there are several cases according to the parties. There are parties that only have indigenous peoples, whereas there are other parties that only have local communities. And then there are other parties that have indigenous peoples as well as local communities. And furthermore, there are other parties that neither have indigenous peoples nor local communities. So obviously, bringing all those perspectives together is not a simple task. Now, Chair, having said that, this is our proposal, and let me remind you that this is the position of the Africa Group. Since you have suggested that the first bracket be placed right in front of the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group, now, if we put the first bracket in that position, then we can continue working through the session. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With this, we think this document is adopted. Thank you. Before we proceed the CRP 5, please allow us have a little bit time to consult. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us please turn to CRP 5, Ref 1. I would like to check if all your interventions regarding insertions of text that had been revised in the contact group but not reflected in the previous CRP are now in the revised CRP. Any request? Canada.
Thank you, Chair. So before our break, we've indicated that we add some changes to the recommendation on Part A. And we indicated that we would return to this section. And so we didn't submit these in writing. We were under the impression that we were going to return to this section. I just want to clarify this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretariat, please clarify.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a clarification that we will come to that section. It's just a first step to check if what we did before the plenary was adjourned is properly reflected. Thank you.
Okay, then we proceed. We will come back to the draft decision of Section A. But before I do it, I propose that we please approve the annex of Section A. Are there any objections? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we may, we would like also to touch about the decision of Section A. It is mainly that referring to the footnote, which provides that, which clarifies that we have not discussed part of the decision in Section A. Hence, we propose to have them in brackets. Referring to footnote, the first footnote before number 1, I think. Okay, and furthermore, on the annex of Section A, again, we would like to emphasize our position that 5.4 and 6.3 is without mandate, both from the framework and from the COP. And this is clarified by the decision we had before us, before this agenda, which even bracket all the references to this idea to distinct or to separate IP and LC. So we propose to have 5.4 and 6.3 deleted. And this is our comment for Section A. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Since what your concern is already in the brackets, so we will take note what you had pointed. Is that okay? Then DRC, you want to have the floor?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. And obviously, the documents that we have here have had sufficient evolution. We've encouraged your leadership on this, and we congratulate you and thank you for the leadership and the difficult work that the Secretariat has done to continuously work to produce this document. But on this document, we really are happy to see that most of the positions were reflected, and that's something that's very encouraging to see here. So we'd like to congratulate you for that. With regard to 5.4 and 6.3, Chair, there were a number of discussions on these different points, but if that doesn't allow us to move forward, well then, the only thing that remains, Chair, is to delete and to adopt the document. Because, again, we risk getting into the same thing, getting into the same discussions, the same arguments, and take much more time. Chair, I can see that you're tired, and when I try to imagine what it might be like for you since the beginning of the meeting, I can understand how tired you must be. But if you're just a short meter away, well, do whatever you need to do to get the job done. So the DRC, for that reason, would like to support this proposal that has been made by Indonesia to delete 5.4 and 6.3 of this program of work. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, and we thank the Secretariat for preparing this revised version, which we could go along with. We would just flag that in Action 7.2, it would just be an editorial correction, because we felt that there are some opening brackets and they don't have the corresponding closing brackets. So it would be helpful to add brackets after guidelines at the fourth line of Action 7.2, because we do have brackets before develop, but we don't see where that bracket closes. So I think it's just an editorial mistake, because I think yesterday we had divergent views on those two proposals. So it would be just an editorial correction, because I think they were not captured here. Thank you.
Noted. So I suggest we take a break for consultation, since there was some intervention. Okay, let's back to the meeting. I see Indonesia, you are asking the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we would like to propose that 5.4 and 6.3 are deleted because it goes beyond the mandate of us in this working group. As we have seen in the prior session, the idea of distinction or separating IPLC is not even been sent to the COP. So all references or proposals of program of work which relates to this idea, we think it should not be included in the text. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I would just like to say two things here. I'll try to be brief. The first is that we are in a plenary, and the plenary is supposed to receive the report of the contact group. The plenary, in yesterday's plenary, I recall that I drew your attention to the fact that the procedures followed in the contact group to address 6.3 were problematic, and you promised that there would be a solution that would be found in the contact group, but the contact group never came back to that issue, actually. So, therefore, the DRC is still being quite flexible, therefore, and hopeful here with regard to this issue. We, for our part, can adopt this document as it's already bracketed. I thank you very much.
Thank you for your flexibility. Can we adopt this document as it is, Indonesia?
Mr. Chair and colleagues, again, I would like to reiterate again our position that we are against any proposal that are without mandate in our document. Because if we start to doing this, we will be creating things without instruction of our leaders in the COP. So we still insist not to have these two paragraphs. Thank you.
Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. I will be referring to another paragraph in the document. May I do so, sir? May I refer to another paragraph, said Colombia? Thank you, Chair. One of the proposals that was put forward yesterday at the contact group meeting in element number 7 of the program of work in 7.2 that is where we looked at several different proposals, and on line 6 of 7.2, a request was made to include, after human rights defenders, the sentence with particular focus on protecting women from all forms of violence. We would like to see that proposal made at the contact group and that was supported by various parties to be included in the text. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that I didn't want to request the floor for this document because most of the concerns that we had have already been voiced and they have been therefore taken into account up to here. When we addressed this document in plenary, we already said that we had concerns with regard to 6.1 and 6.3. We also supported the position of our distinguished brothers from forgive me, I've forgotten the name. From Indonesia, thank you, Indonesia, for this deletion that we requested, and even in the contact group we requested the same. Given that we're trying to exercise a spirit of compromise here, we are happy with the fact that it's in brackets, so in plenary we can consider it in a much more thorough fashion. So we just reiterate our position here with regard to deleting this part. So going beyond what's already been voiced, we've already said that we don't really understand the relevance of having something that will try to make analysis or studies or separation or division between indigenous peoples and local communities. It's very simple. And if you want to keep harmony and make sure that this is aligned with what we've already discussed in previous documents, I think that it would be judicious to be careful here. Thank you.
Thank you. dear colleagues, since we are run out of the time, can I propose we put the whole document in bracket? The entire draft decision, the whole document. Any objection? Russia?
So before I raise any objections, just again to clarify, are you talking about the entire document? So you are not opening decision, or you're talking about annex in section A?
The entire document, entire draft decision, not only the annex.
So then, co-chair, we have comments for the draft decision, because that's also was our understanding, the intention to discuss it before lunch. So we didn't make any comments waiting for this time to comment.
Okay, so we first collect all the comments for the draft decision. Australia?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify the placement of the bracket so we're very clear on what part of the decision. Are you referring to the Conference of the Party decision or the two decisions from this meeting? So are you proposing to put the square brackets at the start of A on page 1 or higher?
Secretariat, please clarify.
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. Since we've had some requests to discuss the draft recommendation in A, we would like to collect some views in the little time that we have on A, on the draft decision on A, and then we sort of go forward with that. But the first step would be please to get your views on the draft recommendation, since there was an appetite to provide those, and we collect those, and of course those will be in bracket, but we'll collect them now. Thank you.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So thank you, Secretariat, for clarification. Then I will go with a few amendments as related to the decision in the section A. So first of all, we like to introduce a new additional preamble paragraph after the second one, after the paragraph starting with recognizing the need. So during today, but also during the whole week, we heard many concerns of parties around the mandate of this convention and many suggestions coming outside this mandate. We also like to recall and actually ask all parties, especially those who attended COP15 in Montreal and meetings of the working group on global biodiversity framework, to recollect the nature of global biodiversity framework. The nature of global biodiversity framework as was designed is a framework for all, for entire UN system, for whole of society approach, if you remember the first part of the framework. Saying that, that means that it's not the only responsibility of this convention to implement global biodiversity framework. There are many actors within their mandate, with their roles, and it doesn't mean that all roles need to be played by this convention. We believe it's absolutely clear it's the way GBF was designed. That was the purpose of GBF. And not making it just a only CBD silo. So that's why we want a short paragraph to be included, reading, recognizing and respecting the scope and the mandate of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So in preamble paragraphs, the following two paragraphs starting with building on. We discuss it in a contact group when there is this list like guideline standards. Secretariat, of course, can correct us, but we are not very much aware of standards developed by convention or working group. So we suggest to delete standards, so it will read as well as guidelines and other tools. And similar in the following paragraph, emphasizing the need. So we will say the same way of the guidelines and other tools related, etc. So the first operative paragraph, as we had also this discussion just some minutes ago, there is a very strong views of parties on different elements of the annex, the program itself, and many square brackets there. We basically prefer to say to keep decided to adopt in square brackets, because we will decide adopt it or not after we clear the all square brackets in the work program. Then we will see what to do with this program. And I have a couple more, but for the sake of time and not moving with details, I will stop here. Thank you very much. Sheshe.
So, Russell, your intervention is noted. Please send the written format, then we will include in brackets. EU first. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our proposal, as we had stated previously during the morning session, refers to the part of where the recommendation is, not in the draft decision section or the draft recommendation. But I believe that now is the time to present any changes. Is that right, Chair? Thank you very much. As we had said previously, when addressing the previous version of the CRP document, the EU and its member states place great value on the work that has been done, although we do understand that there are some elements of progress to be made before we can finally adopt this program of work at the COP. More specifically, our contact group was unable to address in great detail the definition of the various factors or the priority level of each of the tasks. We understand, however, that these are important matters to address so that we can have a clear working program. For this reason, Chair, we have the following text proposal. in order to ensure that henceforward, between now and COP16, we can produce a compendium of the parties' positions, as well as the indigenous peoples and the local communities, and also include any relevant stakeholders, so that we can make progress in identifying these priorities, etc. Therefore, our proposal is as follows, and if you give me permission, I'll read it in English.
Sería la inclusión.
We would suggest the inclusion of the following text, which I shall read, and the text would go in the recommendation right after the first paragraph that says the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group. And right after that, it would say as follows.
Request the Executive Secretary to seek the views of parties, indigenous peoples and local communities, and relevant stakeholders on the actors and prioritization of the tasks identified in the draft program of work, and provide a compilation of views for information for COP16. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Any changes will be included in the bracket. Please provide a written document. As we are running out of the time, I suggest just share your comments directly without any explanation. Thank you. Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We suggest the idea of moving forward during the intersessional period, as the EU has suggested. We would also like to reiterate what we said this morning, because we are aware of the disparity of conditions that weakens or prevents the participation in any of these bodies. So rather than speaking about the how in future occasions, Chile considers that any modality of work should ensure the balanced regional representation and also include the gender representation, and in particular from the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Canada.
Thank you, Chair. On the second preambular paragraph, we would like to replace taking into account such recent development as the adoption. We would replace that with that is aligned with and supports the implementation of, and the sentence would continue. On operative paragraph 2, we would like to add at the end of the sentence, in their national reports as part of their assessment of progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And finally, on paragraph 5, we would like to replace fully involved, with enable the full and effective participation of, and the sentence would continue, indigenous people and local communities, and we would add with their free, prior, and informed consent. Thank you.
Thank you. Please provide a written document afterward. I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And regarding the draft decision, in the third preambular paragraph, with reference to guidelines, we would suggest adding voluntary before guidelines. The same would apply to the last preambular paragraph, starting with emphasizing. So we suggest adding the implementation of voluntary guidelines. And we will also add a reference to voluntary under the operative paragraph number 2. Regarding the proposal just made by the European Union, we will not be in a position to accept this because, as we understand, there are many elements within the program of work that are in brackets, precisely because there has been no agreement on them. And on a similar basis, Brazil and other parties, since the beginning of the discussions within the contact group, had mentioned that they were yet to be convinced of the added value of having the column actors and the column on priority or time frame. And this also is connected with the discussions of the subsidiary body, because many countries felt that depending on the institutional arrangements that we may implement and agree on, this would also affect how the task should be prioritized or not. And we also take note with concern about the amount of intersessional work that has been taking place and how this could place a strain on developing countries. So we wouldn't favor additional intersessional work because this could actually undermine the inclusivity of some of the discussions. And given that many elements are still in brackets, we would struggle to understand how this collection of views would be undertaken. So we would suggest deleting the proposal from the EU as a recommendation from the ad hoc working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Everything comments so far will be in bracket. No need any explanation. I give the floor to Australia as the last speaker, then we close the floor.
Thank you, Chair. No concerns with the proposal raised by Canada. It's an editorial change, just to note that the footnote that's currently further down, footnote 3, will just need to be brought up to that first reference to FBIC. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. We are going to approve this document. But before this, I give the floor to Secretariat for some explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat has taken note as of all the requests for additions that were made. They will be placed in square brackets, all of them, except for the one that was proposed by the European Union as a paragraph coming immediately after the first preambular paragraph. The proposal was there. And in that part of the draft decision, there can be no square brackets. Therefore, there was no consensus, and that will not be included in the documents that the chair is proposing to adopt. All the other interventions that were made will be reflected, and I kindly ask you to send in writing to the Secretariat, because we were not able to take all the comments that were dictated. So please send to the Secretariat and we will reflect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to confirm our position not be able to approve the document so far. Thank you.
Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was not able to take the floor previously, but I wanted to request two additions in para 4. At the end of the first line, right after local communities, I would like to mention including women, youth, and other rights holders. And the same words in para 5 after the mention of communities, mention also women, youth, and other environmental rights defenders. Thank you.
Thank you. I noticed your wrist flying before or during my time to close, so it will be noted. DRC, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. We would just like to request, through you, a clarification with regard to the proposal that has been just made by Colombia. We didn't really understand this proposal. We'd like to hear it once again, if we may. Thank you very much.
Colombia, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the text before us, in section A, in referring to the Conference of the Parties in paragraph 4, that starts with encourages parties to engage with indigenous people and local communities, we would like to add the following.
Women, youth, and environmental right defenders. Exactamente el mismo.
And we would like to include exactly the same text again later on in the following paragraph, that is to say number 5, which starts with urges parties to fully involve, and then the text would be added after the mention of local communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So we already said several times that we can't support the suggestions made currently by Colombia to include environmental human rights defenders, as actually it goes way beyond the global biodiversity framework, even not saying that it's not a mandate of the convention itself, but of other bodies. But even not in the context of the Target 22. Target 22 is not including this group into the elements related to funding, participation, access, nothing of that. It's only talking about the protection. Also, as I understood, so we definitely like to delete it. I understood you will put it in square brackets. Then before those defenders, you need to add the language for paragraph 22 related to disabled people as well. Because actually, in terms of engagement, they are included into those elements, unlike the defenders. And we said already, if you like to go this way, you go with all groups. Yeah, and it still stays in brackets because, again, it's outside global biodiversity framework completely. Thank you.
I give the floor to Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to note that I did capture this last intervention. And with your indulgence, Mr. Co-Chair, I would like to propose a way forward, as we have discussed. And this is to put the entire recommendation in square brackets with the amendments that were proposed. And again, I repeat here, except for the one that was proposed by the European Union, because there was no agreement on that one. And that part of the recommendation cannot have square brackets. But starting, the proposal then is to put the entire recommendation after the preamble paragraph that starts with recommends that. There would be a square bracket in front of the A program of work, so that letter A, the square brackets will go before that, all the way to the end of this document. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chair.
DRC.
Merci, messieurs.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the explanations that have been given by the Secretariat. We know that you've already said that this is something that will be bracketed, as has been mentioned. But if I've understood everything, we took the floor now after Colombia because we want to specifically have brackets around this idea of the environmental human rights defenders specifically. Thank you.
Can we approve this document? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we would like to convey our approval for these documents, mainly because of paragraph 5.4 and 5.3, which we consider is without mandate, since we think that we should work only under mandates. If we start creating things without the mandate of our leaders, then there's no limit of what we will be doing. So at this point, Indonesia cannot accept this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. Do you have any comments for the way forward?
Are you asking me, Mr. Chair? Okay. Okay, since the chair is looking at me directly, and of course, you are our leader, Mr. Chair. I've consulted with Capital, and we may consider the way forward if this room approves for footnote under 5.4 and 6.3, at least for Indonesia, as a record of Indonesia's strongly position in this regard. The footnote would be read: for the record, or for greater certainty, Indonesia strongly considers paragraph 5.4 and 6.3 is without mandate and should not even be considered, since it should not be not only bracketed, but it should have been deleted. That is our proposal. I can read it again if it's necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any objection to Indonesia's proposal? I give the floor to Togo, even you raised the floor before my announcement.
At once, or can I speak French before?
No interpretation.
Je demandais si je peux continuer en français comme il parle.
I was asking if we can continue or not.
Si?
The interpretation service has ended, though. The interpretation service has ended.
Français.
Sorry, there is no interpretation.
Okay. So
Yes.
sorry for
Thank
that.
you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We are supporting the proposal of or the position of Indonesia, as said above, and we are now making this statement on behalf of Africa, as said during the contact group and in this plenary room. We are not agree to have in this document all aspects that separating indigenous people and local community. So we would like also to have all the documents in bracket. Thank you, Madam.
Russian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We support suggestion from Indonesia, and we're actually happy also that in this footnote, it will be clear that it's Indonesia and also Russia behind this footnote. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no any objection to Indonesia's comment, can we adopt this document? Approve. Then next, we adopt this document. Now we go through item 9, other matters. We have now reached agenda item 9, other matters. I open the floor for any other matters to be raised. If none, I don't see any requests from the floor. Thank you. Then we go through item 10, adoption of the report. We now come to document WG8j-12 L1, which is the draft report of the 12th meeting of WG8j. The document was distributed, and I hope that all of you had a chance to read it. I now invite the rapporteur, Ms. Hobes Kikosana from Swatini, to introduce the document. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, you have now before you document CBD-WG8j-L1, which contains the proceedings part of the meeting of this working group. The draft report contains the summaries of the statements made during the 12th meeting of the ad hoc working group on Article 8J and related provisions, and matters regarding the organization of the meeting. I am submitting this document for adoption with the understanding that today's proceedings and approved changes will be incorporated in the final report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sikosana. I propose that we review the report page by page. Any comments on page 1? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may seek your guidance, what happened to agenda 9? Is 9 before 10? Should have been do agenda 9 first, so the report will be complete. Because if we finish the report and we do agenda 9, then agenda 9 will not be in the report.
We did.
When is this, Mr. Chair?
We already did it.
If I may ask, when?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. We went through item 9 before this item 10, and during that time, I see any request from the floor on other matters. Okay, Indonesia.
Apologies, Mr. Chair, we didn't realize that. And if we may request your indulgence, Mr. Chair, we would like to open and conclude agenda 9.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Indonesia delivers this statement on behalf of several members of the OIC group, which includes Indonesia, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Algeria, Egypt, Oman, and Jordan, and other members which might be joining in the later stage in writing. The CBD Convention is one of the few conventions that specifically recognize and supports the existence, concerns, and interests of indigenous people and local communities around the world. In that regard, let me point out that the Palestine represents one of the most biodiversity-rich regions in the world, as it represents the meeting point of 3 continents and many biogeographical zones. However, the lack of sovereignty and continued Israeli illegal occupation practices harms the Palestinian environment and access to natural resources for the local people, and certainly limited what they can achieve, but what can be achieved by Palestinians to comply with the CBD. In that regard, we consider it is very timely and especially important to raise the issue of the current global concern. The tragic events that is currently happening, the illegal and barbaric attack and forced displacement of the indigenous peoples and local communities of Palestine must be stopped. The Palestinian APLC rights needs to be protected as stated by the Convention and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It is evident that what we are witnessing amounts to crimes against humanity. The violence, which cannot be justified as self-defense, must end to prevent a worsening humanitarian catastrophe. As of today, as per available information, the death toll from the illegal actions of the apartheid colonial occupying entity of Israel on the Gaza Strip since October 7 has risen to 11,500, including 4,710 children and 3,160 women. The crimes committed by the apartheid occupying power of Israel also cause severe destruction of nature and biodiversity in Palestine. This man-made destruction will have long-term consequences, not only for Palestine, but also to the world. Thus, at this forum, as the CBD also aims to recognize and support the existence, concerns, and interests of indigenous people and local communities, and to ensure the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of biodiversity, it is relevant for us to call for the war crimes to stop, since it would be inhumane to let this situation persist. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, let's move to item 10. Any comments on the page 1 of the draft report of the meeting? So I see none. Then we go through page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Colombia quiere recordar que cuando abordamos el ítem 7.
Sorry, there is
sorry. Yes,
translation. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Colombia wants to remind that when we aboard the item 7 about the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity. We have a very interesting discussion about the indicators to measure some aspect of the Target 22 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And as a result of this discussion, there were no consensus in the proposal made by Colombia. So Colombia wants to see in their report, under this item 7, the reference to this discussion and the proposal that was made to include the recommendation for the ATEC in order to study indicators to measure the Target 22 in reference with the ensure the full protection of environmental human rights defenders as it is in the Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you, Co-Chair.
We take note of what you had comments. Thank you. So with this, we don't need go. Okay, it's the end of this document. No more comments on this report. So this report is adopted. Thank you. Thank you all. As usual, the consolidated report will be reviewed by the reporter for clearance before it is released. We have completed agenda item 10, adoption of the report. We now move to item 11, closure of the meeting. I have a pleasure to invite Mr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention, to address the meeting. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and let me start by thanking you and your co-chair for your hard work and guidance to us through this week. As we've seen in the last few hours, this hasn't always been easy, but you've nonetheless successfully guided us through this meeting and to the end. And I would like to thank you, and through you, thank the Chinese presidency for your continued support to this process, to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And to our co-chair from the indigenous communities, thank you, and through you to thank all of the International Indigenous Forum and Biodiversity, all of the friends of the Bureau for your strong support to the discussions that have taken place this week. This week we have, we started with the in-depth dialogue where we could increase understanding of the role of indigenous languages and how important they are for the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, innovations and practices, and of the crucial role of women in this respect too. We've also been able to further the work and make important recommendations on the knowledge component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that will be taken up by the subsidiary body on implementation. And we've also progressed the work on the joint program of work on biodiversity and cultural biodiversity, in particular with some recommendations to SBSTA and the SBSTA process, the ATEG on indicators. We also had the pleasure of hosting, at the beginning of the week, the chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And notwithstanding the difficult discussions we've had this afternoon, I think it's very important that we have listened to these recommendations and that COP will be able to consider how to take this forward. Of course, the main focus of your work this week has been on the development of the new program of work on Article 8J and related provisions, emphasizing the importance of the role of indigenous peoples and local communities in the work of this convention, and of course of developing proposals for new institutional arrangements. Again, despite some difficulties, you've made significant progress on this week. There's been a lot of very rich discussions in the contact group. These are now reflected in the recommendation to the COP. We obviously can see that much of this is in brackets, will need further discussion, but I think you still should not underestimate the progress that was made this week and the importance of that. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework clearly acknowledges the important roles and contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of biodiversity and as partners in its conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. And that's why the development of this new program of work is so important, to give further practical support to that recognition. And let me also just note that actually just yesterday in the second committee of the General Assembly, in considering the annual decision on the Convention on Biological Diversity and its contribution to the Sustainable Development Agenda, the General Assembly Second Committee also emphasized the importance of indigenous peoples and local communities to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and welcomed the process that was established at COP15 and we have been conducting here this week to further develop a program of work on this topic. So I think there is no doubt from the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, from the fact that it and the program of work has been welcomed by the second committee and will go to the full plenary of the General Assembly shortly, of the importance of this issue and the importance that the entire international community gives to it. I would like to thank all parties, all representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities, all representatives of women and youth and other parts of civil society, and of all the other stakeholders that have represented here for your hard work in moving us in this direction. We began the week, or before this week, with an international dialogue between indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth and parties, that I think was a very important opportunity for all the parties, the indigenous peoples, local communities and others to listen to each other, to understand, and clearly this need for dialogue will not go away. We will look forward to further dialogues, further ways of understanding each other. We've, I think, recognized the need to understand better different concepts, different cosmovisions, different worldviews, different epistemologies, that is, different ways of knowing, and it'll be very important that there are opportunities for further discussions and dialogue between here and COP so that we can adopt some strong decisions at COP16. So I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank the teams that have been supporting us this week, my colleagues in the Secretariat for their hard work, Olivier Capac and the team, for all the staff, for all the staff that have been working to support this process administratively, also to the interpreters, and to all the staff of this centre. Let me also thank again the Swiss government for hosting us here, for their hospitality. We look forward to returning to Geneva again. In the meantime, I wish you well. Some of you may be staying on for some more hard work on digital sequence information. I wish you all a safe return home, and we'll continue the discussions on this matter at COP16. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now I give the floor to IPLC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm reading this statement on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. As our elders said at the beginning of this meeting, we must take into account all of Mother Earth during our deliberations. In our mission to protect the biodiversity of nature and peoples, we make the following observations. The IIFB welcomes a deeper understanding of how the languages of indigenous peoples and local communities protect and nurture biodiversity. We hope that parties will increase their support for language revitalization initiatives and programs. It is recognized that our lands and territories conserve the greatest existing biodiversity in the world. Therefore, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework recognizes the roles, rights, and contributions of indigenous peoples and local community to biodiversity conservation in Section C and in 8 of the 23 targets. Therefore, the IIFB reiterates that the subsidiary body on Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention and its new program of work that we are developing are fundamental tools for achieving the 2030 targets of the framework. The Kunming-Montreal framework will not happen without us. We call on all parties to support its establishment, incorporating the full, effective, and equitable participation of indigenous peoples and local communities at all levels of decision-making and implementation. We iterate that the new program of work must contain specific tasks that produce concrete results aligned with the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework and subsequent ones. Tasks to develop concrete guidelines for biodiversity conservation, Target 3, territorial planning, Target 1, and customary sustainable use of biodiversity, Targets 5 and 9. Tasks to support the fulfillment of Target 19 for direct funding of collaborative actions by indigenous peoples and local communities to implement our priorities at the local level. Tasks to implement Kunming-Montreal GBF's human rights approach, thus respecting, protecting, and realizing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, including protecting our environmental human rights defenders and leaders from criminalization, violence, and killings from protecting biodiversity. The 4 indicators on traditional knowledge adopted by previous COPs and reviewed here at this week are highly relevant to the KMGBF. The indicators on land tenure and on effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth in decision-making and implementation of biodiversity are especially important. Substar 26 and COP16 should consider this as additional headline indicators to fill current gaps in the Kunming-Montreal GBF monitoring framework. A new subsidiary body on traditional knowledge can provide further expertise for operationalization and implementation. The GBF expresses its willingness to continue to participate in the deliberations and in the construction of proposals to guarantee the life of Mother Earth and all humanity. Biodiversity and cultural diversity are vital bases for renewing human relations with nature towards the vision of Biodiversity 2050. It is important to continue opening spaces for dialogue and mutual understanding and conditions for the full, active, and proactive participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities. In this line, we express our concern about the dynamics of the negotiations by documents in brackets. And we hope we thank the parties that we have strongly supported the explicit mention of Indigenous women and girls in the new work program, institutional arrangements. We believe that respectful and peaceful dialogue, flexibility, and political will of parties are essential to make the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework a reality. We thank all our financial partners, especially the contributors to the voluntary fund, for our assistance to participate at WG8-12. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Thank you, IPLC. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, after 5 days hard work, we ultimately finished all the items. Please allow me to express my deep appreciation to all delegates from all parties and the stakeholders, as well as my co-chair, Ms. June Rubis, all Bureau members, for your hard work, constructive engagement, and the spirit of cooperation and compromise during the past 5 days and the whole process. My sincere appreciation also goes to the government of Switzerland for hosting us these days, and for Mr. David Cooper, the acting executive secretary of the convention, and its dedicated team who keep all aspects of this meeting going on. I also want to express my sincere appreciation for the collaborative spirit and the engagement demonstrated by each and every one of you. The past week is indeed very intensive and productive. We listened, we exchanged, we debated in some way, and finally, we are here. We reached some consensus. We met different opinions, but rather importantly, we know each other's concerns and divisions better. This is quite meaningful while we are marching on the road implementing GBF together. By fostering open communication, we can not only solving challenges, but also paving the way to meet our commitment to the framework so that we can move toward the same direction for the path ahead of us. As we continue our journey forward together, your contributions are invaluable, and I am confident that by working hard in hand, we will achieve remarkable outcomes. Wish you a safe journey home, and I look forward to our next meeting. With this, I now declare the 12th meeting of the ad hoc open-ended Intersessional Working Group on Article AJ and the related provisions of the Convention on Biodiversity closed. Thank you.